This was 2021, July 20th. It was a Thursday morning, and I was riding my bike. I have a road bike that I bought earlier that same year and ride it every other day. And usually ride about 20 miles every other day. And during the weekdays, I usually try to ride through the parks. And so I rode from my house over through some of the parks, and I was in Country Park and riding along, and on the high side of the park, I saw a bee about 10 feet away just flying right at me and hit me right in the lower lip. And it got stuck there, and I kind of pulled it off my lip, and I thought, wow, that's a story I'll have to tell my wife. It's so odd, that you would see it come right into you. So I rode about another, quarter mile. It wasn't very far, and I remember thinking, I don't feel 100%. Should I turn and go home? And I was at the intersection where I could have gone back to the Love Tennis Center or gone down the hill toward Wandale Drive. And I said, being a typical guy, I'll tough it out. I'll be fine. And I was right near the top of that hill. And that's the last thing I remember.
I was training for Boston. And I had to do hill work, and I really didn't want to do hill work. And I said, if I can just do 10 solid hills, I could go home early and not do an extended run afterwards. And I'm running up my third hill, and I see this guy on a bike, and he's starting to weave, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, we're playing chicken. Pick a side, dude. And all of a sudden, as you were passing me, I could tell your mouth had gone slack. And then as you were passing me, all of a sudden you tumbled forward down the hill on your bike 2 or 3 times. And I remember racing back down the hill a good 25 yards. And just at that point, I didn't know if you were awake a lot, whatever. I had
Right.
no idea. So at that point, my training from the Y of teaching CPR just kicked into gear, and I started yelling at people to do things because I did not have a phone on me. So immediately they called 911, and I spoke on speaker to them, and told them I was a trained first responder, and that you were foaming at the mouth, you had blood coming out of you, your face was a mess, your hands, everything, you were not conscious.
Yeah.
And you had a very thready pulse at that point. I could not really hear you breathing at all. And then they insisted that I put you on your back because you were on your side. And, meanwhile, someone is screaming in the background, you're not supposed to move them in case something's wrong with their spine. And I yelled, I'm on with 911 and this is what they told me to do. So I immediately got you onto your back. I had someone hold your feet because I was afraid for your spine. So we rolled you over, and you immediately at that point stopped breathing and could feel no pulse. You were foaming at the mouth and bleeding so much that I kicked into gear and did my chest compressions, and gosh, it's emotional even after all this time.
It is.
And it felt like forever, but it was only a couple of minutes before they got there. And as much as I work out and I've been teaching for 39 years, I actually was sore the next day on my arms. And it was a profound impact on my life as well. I went home, crying, worrying about you. And then it turned out we had people who knew each other. So that was the only reason why I got updates of what was going on. And I was so blessed to know that you were okay. Because at that point when they took over for me, they said, you're done,
Right.
Goodbye.
Right. But thank God you were there.
Oh.
And I couldn't have had a better person arrive at that moment. And, naturally, I've told this story many times, and everyone says, gosh, you're so blessed and so lucky to have that particular person be there at that time, So my wife had told me, you really need to have a card. And actually another guy that works on the bike, he said, you need to have a card in your bike with your wife's name and phone number in case anything ever happens. And so Cindy was smart enough to go in the little bag that was under the saddle and find that. And my wife, of course, she got a call from the hospital, and she had to go to the emergency room. And I do remember I kind of saw these faces around me, and people telling me, John, wake up. And it seemed like it took an hour. It probably was only 5 or 10 minutes, but it just seemed forever. And I struggled to wake up. And finally I woke up, and that's when they asked me what day it was. And then Diane came in, and I don't have much memory of this, but she said, you kept asking, what happened? And she was, I told you were in a bike wreck. And of course, this bike was new to me. And so she said, your first question was, how's my bike? When I finally came to. And then my next, after that, I said, here's what happened. Because they didn't know. No one really knew anything about this bee. Everybody just, they'd done tests on me to see if I'd had a stroke or a heart attack or something. And so she said, she told me what happened. I said, well, you know what? I got stung by a bee. And so that's when they said, well, you must have had an anaphylactic reaction. And so that's kind of where it went. Then I got tested later and found out I had become allergic to bees. So I was in the ICU. I'd broken my collarbone in a number of places, and I have a plate in there now with 9 screws. I broke 3 ribs, broke my shoulder blade. So it was a pretty painful experience once I was back awake. I'm sure everybody in ICU has the same kind of deal. You're never comfortable there, and I was there for 3 days. My wife came in every day. It was during COVID, so she couldn't come during the night, but she would come at 8 in the morning and leave at 8 at night. And it was just really painful. And, and even then I got moved to a regular room, and then a few days later I got to go home. But, I was really immobile. My whole body just felt all broken. And I didn't know anything about my heart stopping or not breathing. I just knew that I had a bike crash. So, after I'd been home for a few days, she said, you need to understand what really happened. I'm sure you have some questions. And she said, you have a guardian angel that looked after you. And so she told me how Cindy saw me crash and came right down and did what she did. And we forever.
Oh. You're making me cry.
Anyway, so that's really, I'm so grateful that she was trained in that and that she was there. And it's a testament to the fact that everybody should know how to do this stuff, because, most people probably would have stood around or waited for EMS to arrive. And I'm back to pretty much normal. I'm probably not going to have my fastball anymore, but any other than that, I'm totally normal. And I'm sure that wouldn't have been the case if Cindy wasn't there. It was a long recovery. I probably spent 8 or 12 weeks going back and forth trying to get this where it would work. And but then since then, I've been pretty much fine. You think a bee, how much damage could a bee do to me? And that's what I always thought too. And I've heard about people who've been, allergic, but I just didn't really give it much thought. And but it's deadly. I mean, it could have easily been deadly. You have anything to add to that?
Well, just your generosity in donating to the Y for their CPR programs. The latest statistics is less than 46% of the population are actually CPR certified.
Wow.
in the United States.
Right.
And so your generous donation of the ability of holding community classes and the new Resuscita Andy and Anna's that you provided for the Y has been so instrumental in a lot of people's continuing education and new education. So they've been able to offer some community-free classes because of you.
Well, it's the very least I could do, And so I'm happy to do that and spread the word. And, I'd like everybody to know that story, so I'm happy to tell it. I'm just happy I'm here to tell it. A lot of my neighbors, when I first was recovering, they said, look, go home. First day, I want you to walk around your house a little bit, which was really hard to do. Then they said the second day, I want you to go out 3 different times and walk for 10 minutes. And then every day, increase those walks by a minute. And after 2 weeks, I was walking, about 30 minutes a time. And I felt a lot better, and people would say to me, well, it's great to see you. And I always said, well, it's great to be seen, So Yeah, it was really something. But people have really rallied around and helped me and been so supportive, and I'm very grateful, especially Cindy.